Aisle of Dread. Aisle 6 was a fluorescent purgatory of canned goods. Tomato soup glared from regimented rows, mocking Martha's appetite. She used to love making tomato soup for George, adding a pinch of sugar and a swirl of cream just the way he liked it. Now, the thought of simmering a pot of anything felt hollow. She pushed her cart, the squeak of the wheels a lonely soundtrack in the brightly lit store. Grocery shopping had become a chore, a stark reminder of George's absence. He used to navigate the aisles with a mischievous grin, tossing in exotic fruits she'd never heard of, daring her to create something new. Now she stuck to the basics: coffee, bread, a lonely head of lettuce. The fluorescent lights buzzed, casting a sterile glow on the rows of identical cans. Martha reached for a can of beans, her hand trembling slightly. She felt invisible, a ghost drifting through the vibrant marketplace, unnoticed and unneeded. She remembered George teasing her about always needing a list. "Martha, you're a woman of order," he'd say, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Now, the list felt less like a guide and more like a script for a solitary performance. She glanced around, noticing a young couple laughing as they compared cereal boxes. A pang of envy shot through her. It wasn't just the companionship she missed, but the shared joy in simple things. The act of choosing, of planning a meal together, of building a life, one grocery trip at a time. She hurried past the deli counter, the aroma of sliced meats making her stomach churn. The butcher, a burly man with a booming voice, used to call out, "Martha, my dear, what can I get for you today?" Now, he simply nodded, his eyes glazed over, as if she were just another nameless face in the crowd. Finally, she reached the checkout lanes. The lines snaked and pulsed with restless energy. She hated waiting, the forced proximity to strangers, the awkward shuffling and strained smiles. But then she saw it, the self-checkout lane. A beacon of order and control. She maneuvered her cart towards the automated station, a small thrill coursing through her. No forced small talk, no judging eyes on her meager purchases. Just her and the scanner, a silent partnership in the act of consumption. She carefully unloaded her groceries, placing each item on the designated scale. The scanner beeped efficiently, confirming each transaction. She bagged her purchases with precision, arranging the items to maximize space and prevent crushing. It was a small victory, a tiny act of defiance against the overwhelming sense of loss that had consumed her. As she paid with her debit card, she felt a surge of something akin to pride. She had navigated the treacherous aisles, conquered the checkout lane, and emerged, victorious, with a bag of groceries. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small step back into the world, a tentative assertion of her own agency. Maybe, just maybe, she could learn to live again, one self-checkout at a time. Canned goods collision. The fluorescent lights of aisle 6 hummed, reflecting off the rows of neatly stacked cans. Martha squinted, her bifocals slipping down her nose as she scanned the labels. San Marzano tomatoes. That was the key. Nana Amelia's recipe demanded them, and Martha wasn't about to disappoint her memory. She reached for a can, her fingers brushing against something metallic. Not tomatoes. She craned her neck, the scent of marinara and disappointment heavy in the air. Generic stewed tomatoes. Sighing, she readjusted her glasses, the chain digging slightly into the back of her neck. Maybe they were on the top shelf? Suddenly, a jolt rocked her cart, sending a cascade of mandarin oranges tumbling onto the linoleum. "Oh dear! I am so sorry!" A man's voice, warm and laced with genuine remorse. Martha straightened, her cheeks flushing. He was younger, maybe late 40s, with kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "It's quite all right," she managed, bending to gather the scattered fruit. He knelt beside her, his hand brushing hers as they both reached for the same orange. "David," he said, his smile widening. "David Chen. And again, I'm terribly sorry. I wasn't watching where I was going." "Martha Albright," she replied, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. It had been so long since she'd introduced herself to anyone new. "And no harm done, really." He stood, holding a handful of oranges. Allow me, he said, gently placing them back in her cart. Perhaps I can atone for my clumsiness by helping you find what you're looking for. He glanced at her cart, then back at her. Something Italian, perhaps? San Marzano tomatoes, Martha confessed, pointing towards the top shelf. But I'm afraid they're just out of reach. David chuckled, a rich, pleasant sound. A damsel in distress? How can I refuse? He strode to the end of the aisle, grabbed a small stepladder, and positioned it in front of the tomato display. Climbing up with a casual ease that made Martha feel a pang of something she couldn't quite name, he plucked a can from the top shelf. Here you go, he said, handing it down to her with a wink. Though I must say, for someone who cooks with such exotic ingredients, you seem rather vertically challenged. Martha laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. Exotic? San Marzano tomatoes are the saffron of the tomato world, David declared dramatically. Only the best for your sauce, I presume? Only the best for Nana Amelia's sauce, she corrected, her eyes twinkling. It's a family tradition. He hopped down from the ladder, replacing it neatly. A family tradition. I like that. Perhaps, if you're ever in need of a taste tester. Martha hesitated, suddenly acutely aware of the lines around her eyes, the way her hand trembled slightly as she clutched the can of tomatoes. Perhaps, she echoed softly, feeling a blush creep up her neck. Perhaps another time. Barcode blues. Martha wrestled with the clamshell of San Marzano tomatoes. The self-checkout scanner stubbornly refused to cooperate. Beep. Nothing. She rotated the package, presenting the barcode from every conceivable angle. Still nothing. A low growl escaped her lips. She hated these machines. Always temperamental. Having some trouble? The voice was male, warm, laced with a hint of amusement. Martha looked up, startled. Standing a respectful distance away was a young man, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. He held a basket containing what looked like the makings of a stir-fry, bok choy, ginger, a vibrant red pepper. This infernal barcode, Martha said, brandishing the tomatoes like a weapon. It simply refuses to scan. Those things can be tricky, he said, stepping closer. Sometimes the laser gets a little wonky. He gestured apologetically. Mind if I take a look? Martha shrugged, secretly relieved. Be my guest. I'm about to give up and just get a real cashier. He leaned in, his shoulder brushing hers lightly. A faint scent of sandalwood and something vaguely citrusy filled her nostrils. He examined the scanner, then the barcode. Looks like the laser is a little misaligned, he murmured, more to himself than to her. He pulled out his phone, a sleek, silver thing, and tapped at the screen. Martha expected him to search for a customer service number, but instead, he seemed to be navigating some kind of technical interface. After a few seconds of focused tapping, he held the phone near the scanner. A series of high-pitched beeps emanated from the device. Okay, he said, stepping back. Try it now. Martha, skeptical, held up the tomatoes. This time, the scanner beeped instantly, registering the purchase. Well, I'll be, she breathed. How did you do that? He grinned, a flash of white teeth. A little tech wizardry. I used to work for a company that makes these scanners. Just a little recalibration. He extended his hand. David, by the way. Martha, she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, warm. Thank you, David. I was about to lose my mind. No problem at all, Martha. San Marzano tomatoes, huh? Making a good sauce? Trying to, she admitted. I'm attempting Marcella Hazan's recipe. It's supposed to be life-changing. His eyes lit up. Hazan! A woman of impeccable taste. Are you using butter or olive oil? Martha chuckled. Butter, of course. As Hazan intended. Excellent choice, David said, nodding approvingly. Well, I should let you get back to your sauce. But it was nice meeting you, Martha. You too, David, she said, a little breathless. As he turned to leave, she couldn't help but notice the way the fluorescent lights caught the highlights in his dark hair. There was something appealing about his quiet competence, his easy smile. She watched him go, a flutter of something unfamiliar in her chest. Maybe these self-checkout lines weren't so bad after all. A rude awakening. The conveyor belt whirred, pulling her groceries toward the scanner. David, bless his heart, hadn't moved. He leaned against the counter, one hand tucked casually in his pocket, the other occasionally gesturing as he asked about her pasta sauce. So, you really simmer it for 3 hours? Even on a Tuesday? Martha chuckled, a little flustered by his continued attention. Only if I have the time. Weekends are best. The longer it simmers, the richer the flavor. My grandmother swore by it. She watched as the cashier, a bored-looking teenager with bright pink hair, scanned her milk. See? Tradition, David said, nodding sagely. That's what's missing these days. Everyone's in such a rush. He picked up a jar of her basil pesto and turned it over in his hands, examining the ingredients. Homemade is always better though, right? Always, Martha agreed, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It had been, well, too long since someone had shown such genuine interest in her cooking, in her life. A woman with a tightly wound bun and a shopping cart overflowing with organic kale chips and kombucha cut in front of David, practically bumping him out of the way. Excuse me, she huffed, glaring at Martha. Some of us have places to be. Martha recoiled slightly, a knot forming in her stomach. The woman didn't stop there. As her own groceries were being rung up, she turned back to Martha, a sour expression twisting her features. Honestly, she said loud enough for everyone in the checkout line to hear. It's a bit much, isn't it? The cradle robbing, I mean. She gave a pointed look at David, then back at Martha, before turning away with a disdainful sniff. The air in the checkout lane seemed to thicken. Martha felt her face flush, a wave of mortification washing over her. She stammered, trying to find a response, but the words caught in her throat. The pink-haired cashier avoided her gaze, concentrating intently on scanning a bag of tortilla chips. David straightened up, his easygoing demeanor vanishing. He met the woman's gaze head-on, his eyes hardening. Excuse me, he said, his voice surprisingly firm. Martha is a fascinating woman and an excellent cook. I'm learning a lot from her about San Marzano tomatoes, among other things. He paused, then added, with a disarming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Besides, I'm old enough to choose my own friends, thank you very much. Then, before the woman could retort, David turned to Martha, his expression softening. He gave her a subtle wink, a silent message of reassurance that sent a flutter through her heart. Don't let her bother you, he murmured, his voice low and conspiratorial. Some people just don't appreciate a good sauce recipe. Confessions in the parking lot. The automatic doors whooshed open, releasing them into the humid twilight. Martha inhaled, the air thick with the scent of impending rain and exhaust fumes. Well, that was easier than I expected, she said, clutching her bag of groceries. The San Marzano tomatoes nestled amongst the basil and provolone felt like a small victory. David chuckled, the sound surprisingly deep. He matched her pace as they walked towards the parking lot, the asphalt radiating heat even as the sky darkened. I'm glad I could help. I love to cook too, though I'm more of a Thai green curry kind of guy than a red sauce aficionado. Martha smiled. My late husband, George, adored my Sunday sauce. It's been a while since I made it. I suppose I'm honoring him, in a way. They reached her car, a silver Buick Regal, slightly dented on the passenger side. Martha fumbled for her keys. David stood a polite distance away, hands in his pockets. The fluorescent lights of the parking lot cast harsh shadows on his face, highlighting the sincerity in his eyes. He cleared his throat. Martha, there's something I need to tell you. She unlocked the car door, her heart doing a little flutter kick. Oh? He took a deep breath. I've seen you before. At the library? You always sit by the window, reading. Martha's eyebrows shot up. I do? I didn't realize. I noticed you looking at the Italian cookbooks. And then, when I saw you in the store today, looking for the San Marzano tomatoes, well, I couldn't resist. He shifted his weight, his gaze dropping to the ground. I sort of orchestrated our meeting. Martha stood frozen, her hand still on the door handle. Orchestrated? He'd planned this? A strange mix of flattery and suspicion warred within her. You mean you knew I was looking for those tomatoes? He nodded, shamefaced. I asked the stock boy which aisle they were on. I know it sounds creepy. Creepy? It was audacious. Bold. Maybe even a little charming? Martha sighed. David, I appreciate the gesture. But I'm old enough to be your mother. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. I'm aware of the age difference, Martha. But that doesn't change the fact that I enjoy talking to you. I find you interesting. A genuine warmth filled his expression. And frankly, I was hoping to ask you out for coffee. The audacity! Coffee? After admitting he'd stalked her, well, not stalked, exactly, more like, observed her from afar. Martha closed her eyes for a moment, the scent of impending rain growing stronger. She had been lonely. Terribly lonely. And there was something about David's earnestness, his slightly awkward charm, that was undeniably appealing. David, she began, her voice wavering slightly. This is a lot to take in. I need to think about it. He nodded understandingly. Of course. No pressure at all. Just, if you ever want to talk about Italian cookbooks, or Thai green curry, or anything at all, you have my number. He gestured to the paper bag she held, the one he'd written it on. Martha looked at the bag, then back at David. The rain was starting to fall, fat drops splattering on the asphalt. All right, David. I'll think about it. She slipped into her car, the leather of the seat cool against her skin. As she started the engine, she saw him standing there, watching her. She offered a small, hesitant wave, and then backed out of the parking space, the taillights of her Buick disappearing into the gathering gloom. Carol's counsel. The mingled scents of garlic and oregano hung heavy in the air as Martha entered Bella Nate. Carol, already settled in their favorite corner booth, waved with uninhibited enthusiasm, a breadstick clutched precariously in her fingers. Martha, darling! You're tardy, as usual. Battling those infernal self-checkouts again, were we? Carol's laughter tinkled like wind chimes. She gave Martha's hand a quick squeeze as she settled into the booth. All right, out with it. What drama delayed you? Martha exhaled, a faint smile gracing her face. It's actually somewhat amusing. I was at Miller's, hunting for San Marzano tomatoes, a fool's errand, by the way, and this man. Carol perked up instantly, eyes gleaming with anticipation. A man, you say? This has potential. Martha recounted the supermarket saga, from the wanderlust of misplaced artichokes to the shared mirth, initially glossing over David's age. She emphasized his warm demeanor and the effortless flow of their conversation. Carol absorbed every detail, punctuating the story with exclamations of intrigue. When Martha reached the end, Carol's eyes widened. And you let him go without exchanging numbers? Martha, you're incorrigible. Martha busied herself arranging the silverware. Aye, he asked. But I faltered. He's younger, Carol. A decade, perhaps more. Carol brushed the concern aside with a flick of her wrist. So? 10 years is nothing. You look marvelous, Martha. Frankly, I sometimes forget you're a day past 50. And besides, are we to turn away unexpected joy? Happiness isn't age-restricted. Martha worried her lip. It's simply unexpected. My last date was, well, ancient history. Precisely. And you deserve joy. You deserve someone to look at you with that same spark you described in the produce aisle. Heaven knows, Arthur never gave me that look, unless I was brandishing a winning scratch-off. Carol shivered theatrically. Believe me, Martha, regret is a far heavier cross to bear than a few whispers at the bridge table. Their pasta arrived, a cloud of savory steam rising to greet them. Martha listlessly prodded her lasagna, her appetite having fled in the face of encroaching apprehension. Ever attuned to Martha's moods, Carol reached across the table, her hand a warm anchor on Martha's. Listen, I realize this feels daunting. But what's the worst-case scenario? A mildly uncomfortable dinner followed by the realization he isn't your soulmate? Hardly catastrophic. You've weathered worse storms. At the very least, you'll have another anecdote for our next rendezvous. She squeezed Martha's hand. But what if he is the one? What if he's the one who sets your laughter free, the one who surprises you with wildflowers on a random Tuesday, the one who reminds you that life still brims with promise? Don't you owe it to yourself to discover the answer? Martha locked eyes with Carol, and saw the unyielding loyalty and genuine affection mirrored back. A tentative smile bloomed on her face. Perhaps you're right. Of course, I'm right. Now details. Recount his exact words. Was he sporting a wedding band? What about his shoes? Footwear is a window into a man's soul, after all. Carol leaned in conspiratorially, her previous pronouncements forgotten in the heady rush of potential romance. Martha giggled, the anxieties of a moment ago receding. Maybe, just maybe, Carol had a point. Maybe it was time to embrace the unknown. He wasn't wearing a ring. And I think he wore loafers. Brown loafers. Brown loafers. Intriguing. Carol murmured, her analytical wheels already in motion. We'll need to dissect this further. But first, tell me everything about his smile. Coffee and connection. The aroma of roasted beans hung heavy in the air of the daily grind. A welcome comfort against the late autumn chill. Martha had arrived early, securing a small table near the window, the better to watch the world hurry past. She nervously smoothed down the skirt of her floral dress, a burst of color against the gray day. David was punctual, his smile as warm as the coffee he ordered. Thanks for meeting me, Martha, he said, settling into the chair opposite her. I hope my tomato suggestion wasn't too forward. Not at all. She chuckled, the sound lighter than it had been in months. I'm always looking for a good San Marzano source. And the story behind them sounded fascinating. Their conversation flowed easily, meandering from heirloom tomatoes to their shared love of old movies. He admired her adventurous spirit in trying new recipes. She was intrigued by his work with underprivileged kids, teaching them coding. Martha found herself laughing freely, her usual anxieties momentarily forgotten. David listened intently, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. I volunteer at the community center every Tuesday and Thursday, he said. It's incredibly rewarding, seeing them grasp these concepts, opening up a whole new world for them. That's wonderful, David, Martha replied, genuinely impressed. It's so important to give back. They discovered a mutual appreciation for jazz, both lamenting the closing of the old jazz club downtown. He even knew the name of her favorite obscure trumpet player. Martha felt a spark ignite, a flicker of possibility she hadn't felt in years. He made her feel seen, understood, and appreciated. Suddenly, a voice cut through the comfortable murmur of the coffee shop. David? What are you doing here? A woman stood beside their table, her arms crossed, her expression thunderous. She was younger than Martha, with fiery red hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. David visibly paled. Sarah, he said, his voice strained. What a surprise. Sarah's gaze flicked dismissively over Martha, landing back on David with a hard edge. Surprise? You told me you were working late tonight. Martha felt a flush creep up her neck. She wanted to disappear, to become one with the worn wooden table. This was a disaster. I had to run an errand first, David stammered, avoiding eye contact with either woman. Sarah, this is Martha. Martha, this is Sarah, an old friend. Sarah's lips twisted into a sarcastic smile. An old friend? Is that what I am now? She leaned closer to David, her voice dropping to a low hiss. We had plans, remember? Dinner at your mother's? The air crackled with tension. Martha knew she should say something, make an excuse, leave, but she was frozen, caught in the crossfire of their awkward drama. David looked trapped, his face a mask of discomfort. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the rhythmic whir of the espresso machine, each pulse a hammer blow against Martha's fragile hope. Standing tall, the fluorescent lights of the Italian imports aisle hummed, a stark contrast to the sudden chill that settled around Martha. She finally spotted the San Marzano tomatoes, nestled behind a stack of artichoke hearts. Just as she reached for a can, a voice, sharp and laced with ice, cut through the air. "So this is her?" Martha turned to see a woman, sculpted and polished like a museum piece, standing with her arms crossed. Her gaze, unwavering and critical, landed on Martha, taking in her slightly rumpled sweater and sensible shoes. David stood behind the woman, his face etched with a mixture of annoyance and apology. "Sarah," David began, his voice tight. "What are you doing here?" Sarah ignored him, her attention fixed on Martha. "I just wanted to see the woman who's apparently replaced me. You seem ordinary." Martha bristled. Ordinary? She'd raised 3 children, navigated a career, and rebuilt her life after loss. Ordinary was the last word she'd used to describe herself. She set the can of tomatoes down with a soft thud. "I'm not trying to replace anyone," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor of anger rising within her. "David and I simply met. And I find him to be anything but ordinary." Sarah scoffed. "Oh, please. He's just going through a phase. You're probably half his age." "That's none of your business, Sarah," David interjected, stepping forward. "And it's certainly not fair to Martha." Martha held up a hand, silencing him. She met Sarah's gaze, her own unwavering. "My age is irrelevant. What matters is the connection 2 people share. And frankly, I don't need your approval, or your assessment, to enjoy a conversation or a shared grocery run with anyone I choose." The air crackled with unspoken tension. Sarah's perfectly manicured hand tightened into a fist. "You think you know him? You have no idea what he's like. He'll bore you to tears in a week. He's predictable." A small smile played on Martha's lips. Predictable isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes, predictability is exactly what someone needs. And perhaps, she added, tilting her head slightly, he's looking for something different this time around. Sarah's face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came out. Instead, she glared at David, her eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this," she hissed, before turning on her heel and stalking away, the click of her heels echoing in the suddenly silent aisle. David let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "Martha, I am so sorry. I had no idea she would." "Don't apologize," Martha said, picking up the can of tomatoes. "You didn't do anything wrong. And," she added, a genuine smile gracing her face, "I enjoyed that. Standing up for myself, I mean." David watched her, a new light in his eyes. He'd always known Martha was kind and intelligent, but he hadn't realized the strength that lay beneath her gentle demeanor. "I'm impressed," he said, his voice sincere. "You handled that with grace and honesty." Martha shrugged, a blush creeping up her neck. "I'm a bit old to be bullied in a grocery store aisle." She tucked the tomatoes into her basket. "Shall we find those basil leaves?" Aisle 6 Serendipity. The sharp ring of David's keys against porcelain jolted Martha from her reverie. She chuckled, observing his clumsy grab for the car key. Mornings were their own brand of pandemonium, a flurry of yawns and quick gulps of caffeine before the city's pulse consumed them. He caught her eye, a mischievous glint in his. "Near casualty in the coffee zone. Imagine the commotion." "Amusing for you, perhaps," Martha retorted playfully, bumping his arm. "I'd be the one fishing out the soggy metal." He dipped his head, the rasp of his unshaven cheek a fleeting caress against her skin. A small price for a hand-holding opportunity. Those small rituals, the light-hearted ribbing and casual touches, had become the understated melody of their relationship. A stark contrast to the peaceful isolation she had long cultivated, yet she welcomed the alteration, the spark David ignited in her existence. Later in the week, they circled back to Peterson's, the stage for their accidental introduction. Remember the great tomato tumble? David grinned, navigating their cart through the produce display. You looked ready to wage war on the entire canned goods section. Martha feigned offense, shoving him lightly. I was weighing the crucial distinction between crushed and diced. A vital decision for Sunday gravy. Her voice softened as she glanced towards aisle 6. It's peculiar, isn't it? I sought Italian plum tomatoes and discovered this. David halted the cart, turning to face her fully. He enveloped her hand in his thumb tracing soothing circles on her skin. My most valuable impulse purchase. They ambled down aisle 6, their list forgotten, simply reliving the memory. The overhead lights buzzed with a sterile hum, generic elevator music trickled from hidden speakers, yet everything resonated with newfound meaning. The grocery store was now a landmark, a testament to life's delightful uncertainties. Martha tightened her grip on his hand. I never imagined, after Robert, I couldn't fathom feeling this way again. He offered no words, just a steady gaze, empathy mirrored in his eyes. He knew of Robert, of the decades of intertwined lives and the void his passing created. He didn't attempt to replace him, but rather, nurtured a space for fresh growth alongside it. That night, nestled on her porch as the twilight bled across the horizon in shades of fire and lavender, Martha experienced a tranquility she'd thought unattainable. The past remained a component of her, a mosaic of memories interwoven into her essence, yet it no longer dictated her. She was free to embrace the now, to anticipate the future with a burgeoning sense of optimism. David sat close, his hand covering hers, a quiet promise of shared adventures and peaceful interludes. Perhaps love wasn't a singular event, a finished chapter in a narrative. Perhaps it was an ongoing saga, blossoming in unexpected ways, in the most mundane of settings. Maybe, just maybe, aisle 6 alchemy was the best kind of alchemy imaginable. She rested her head against his shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her. The air carried the sweet perfume of honeysuckle and the distant thrum of city life, a symphony of existence unfolding around them. And in that heartbeat, Martha knew she was precisely where she was meant to be,